Sorry for the delay, but better late than never, I suppose. I'm here with my Week 6 2017 NFL recap. The topsy-turvy world that is the National Football League and all of its unpredictabilities. Let's go ahead and kick this off by talking about the winners and losers from the week that was. In terms of the winners, you got to look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Going into Carolina against a very good Panthers team, and being able to handle business the way they did, the Philadelphia Eagles now sit at 5-1 atop the NFC East and look like as good of a threat as anybody in that conference to go to the Super Bowl. It's crazy how things work. The Minnesota Vikings and Detroit Lions have to be winners, even though the Lions didn't win on Sunday. The Vikings did, but ultimately, more importantly for them, with Aaron Rodgers' broken collarbone potentially being out for the rest of the season, it opens things up significantly in that NFC North for both the Vikings and the Lions, and Bears fans that think that there's a chance in the world that they could get into the mix. Please put down the peace pipe. The Pittsburgh Steelers, coming off of that embarrassing loss to the Jaguars at home where Big Ben threw 5 interceptions and they just didn't look like they really cared very much. They go on the road and beat the best team in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. They beat them again. So now, as you had the narrative shift towards one section of the Steelers team is kind of a mess, who knows what's going to happen, their season could quickly be over. Now all of a sudden they've beaten the best team in the AFC, and is that narrative going to shift again? And then I look at the Los Angeles Rams going into Jacksonville and beating them. They're the freaking Rams sitting at 4-2. Who'd have thunk it? Maybe some of you did, but a lot didn't. In terms of the losers of the week, I got to look at the Atlanta Falcons. This is a team, if not for some late dropsies in the opening week at Soldier Field against the Bears, and a couple of weeks later, a call that went against the Detroit Lions. For all intents and purposes, this Falcons team should be 1-4. They are not that good. And they're very close to their record actually matching the team that they really truly are. And if you weren't convinced of what this team really truly was with their last game, that home loss to Buffalo, this loss Sunday to the Dolphins should have done it. You let Jay Cutler come back on you. That's it. You're losers for the week, period. And then the Denver Broncos. You got the Giants coming in 2 Mile High, haven't won a game. There's no Odell Beckham Jr., there's no Brandon Marshall, there's no Sterling Shepard. And you would have thought the Denver Broncos were the team coming with all the trouble, coming in with all the mess, because the Giants went into Mile High, and they beat the brakes off the Broncos. They made Simeon look bad. They knocked him out of the game. It was just an absolute mess. Here was a clear opportunity to keep pace in the AFC West, and the Broncos piss one down their leg. Completely unacceptable. The biggest losers of the week still have to be the Cleveland Browns, not just because they are the Cleveland Browns, but ultimately because they are the skid marks of the National Football League. It's not just bad enough that they lost another game, and now they're 0-6. It's not just bad enough that they decided to bench Deshaun Kaiser, probably ruining him mentally for the season, so they could play Kevin Hogan so that way he could proceed to throw 3 picks because the Browns gonna Browns. It's not just bad enough that Deshaun Watson came into Cleveland, the guy that you could have taken 12th overall but ultimately didn't because you wanted to get a bevy of more picks because that's really worked out for you, right? It's also having to watch Thursday night as the guy that I said the Browns should have taken, number 2 overall in 2016, Carson Wentz, led his team to an impressive road victory over the Panthers, and they are right now the team to beat in the NFC. For all you Browns fans that wanted to talk all that crap about how great it was to get all those picks and how it made sense and all of that, shut the hell up. Your team is your team for a reason, and they are reasserting their dominance as the real true skid marks of the National Football League. When you have the opportunity to take a quarterback, in particular, I specifically go back to 2016, I told you, draft Carson Wentz. You have one option, take Carson Wentz. They didn't listen, and look where the hell they are now. Steamroll into another number 1 overall pick, still looking for that long-term answer at the quarterback position. Browns gonna Browns. Let's move on to 4th and 10. So let me get this straight. The Miami Dolphins, who looked absolutely atrocious offensively the previous 2 games that they played, went into Atlanta and after surrendering a 17-point halftime lead, proceeded to score 20 unanswered points in Atlanta to beat the Falcons. Number one, what the hell? Number two, I told you the Falcons wouldn't be that good. And number three, who the hell can predict anything in the NFL this year? Maybe it's time to take the Saints just a little bit more seriously. They owned the Detroit Lions on Sunday. Now they sit at 3-2. And what's crazy is their defense is actually starting to resemble a little bit more of an NFL defense, scoring 3 defensive touchdowns. Where the hell is this coming from? Well, maybe it's finally, along with guys like Cameron Jordan, you get first-round picks like Marshawn Lattimore that play really, really well. All I know is this, is that right now, with Drew Brees in that offense, you've got Ingram and Kamara in that backfield. If you've got that defense playing to any type of level at all, we have to start thinking about this Saints team as being a wild card threat in the NFC. For all the talk about Kareem Hunt, I think it's actually Deshaun Watson that, as each week goes by, is starting to pick up a lot of momentum to being the Offensive Rookie of the Year. He went into Cleveland, threw for 3 touchdown passes, and they dominated the Cleveland Browns 33-17. Yeah, it's the Browns and all of that, but it's got to feel like a little bit of vindication for Deshaun Watson, because ultimately the Cleveland Browns had the opportunity to draft him, but did not. And for the Cleveland Browns, it was bad enough to pass on Carson Wentz. Now you've also passed on Deshaun Watson. Skid mark's gonna skid mark. In the topsy-turvy world that is the 2017 NFL season, the Jets had won 3 games in a row. They're going to face the Patriots with first place in the division on the line. And they go off to a 14-0 lead, and you're like, what the hell is going on here? Ultimately, they came crashing back down to reality a little bit. The Patriots came back. It doesn't help that Austin Seferian-Jenkins scores a touchdown to only ultimately have not scored a touchdown, and one of the screwiest calls I've seen in quite some time. And the Patriots seem to slowly be starting to find themselves, and the Jets have now gotten themselves into a position where they're not very good, they're not very bad, they're just dumb enough to blow the opportunity to tank and get a top-flight quarterback in next year's draft. After going down 17 on the road early Sunday, Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers head coach, made the decision. Out goes Brian Hoyer. In comes C.J. Beathard. 49ers fans, the C.J. Beathard era has begun for however long that's going to last. But the early returns were somewhat promising. The 49ers came back in a big way and were in position to win that game late. And while ultimately they did not, the 49ers have to feel a little bit better as a team because they're competitive in some of these games. They're close to winning, and eventually they'll win a couple of these things this year. So much for Adrian Peterson being washed up, I guess. He gets traded to Arizona in his first game with the Cardinals. He runs for 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. And now you wonder, can this change the dynamics a little bit of the Arizona Cardinals offense and potentially the trajectory of the Arizona Cardinals season? Derek Carr returned, but ultimately it didn't matter as the Chargers were able to beat the Raiders on a last-second field goal. And from a Chargers standpoint, as great as this season hasn't been, they do have to wonder, if they had a more effective field goal kicker in a couple of games, would they be looking at being 4-2 instead of 2-4 and thinking entirely differently about how this season could potentially play out? Kickers matter, people. And if you don't have one, it can come up and bite you in the ass. Just ask the Los Angeles Chargers. A week after the disaster that was the game against the Jaguars, where the offense looks kind of lifeless, Big Ben is throwing 5 interceptions. Big Ben's talking about, I don't know if I have it anymore. Leave it to the drama queen to get all this attention on him, to get everybody feeling some kind of way about him. So that way, come this past Sunday, they can go into Arrowhead and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. There's like no real football reason it should happen other than the Steelers are a terrible matchup for the Chiefs. They can't stop Le'Veon Bell. They can't stop Antonio Brown. It's that simple. And as easy as it would be for me, based off of my history, to say that the Chiefs are not a real Super Bowl contender because of Alex Smith, while some of that I still feel tends to be true, the reality is for this Chiefs team is if they can't figure out how to stop a guy like Le'Veon Bell, and they can't figure out how to stop giving up so many big plays in the passing game, it doesn't matter what their regular season record's going to be. It's going to be another early playoff exit for this Chiefs team. You can bet on it. Because ultimately nothing in the National Football League this year makes a whole lot of sense. The Giants at 0-5 without their top 3 receivers, an aging, declining quarterback, and an offensive line that can't protect, a team that can't really run the ball at all, goes into Mile High and beats the brakes off of the Broncos. What in the hell is going on here? And another week in the NFL, another big-time star goes down with injury, potentially being lost for the season. If it's not David Johnson and then Odell Beckham Jr. and J.J. Watt, now perhaps the single biggest blow of all to the league to date in this season, Aaron Rodgers goes down early in the game Sunday against the Vikings with a broken collarbone, could potentially be out for the year, and I know he has had surgery on said collarbone. And some of you might expect, as a Bears fan, for me to be giddy about this. Hey, the Packers are going to be without Aaron Rodgers for an extended period of time. Maybe the Bears can actually beat them. To which I say, no, ding dong, you're wrong. I take no pleasure or joy in watching the best quarterback in the National Football League going down with an injury. Ultimately, the NFL game is about stars, and this league is getting really snake bit this year in terms of some of their biggest stars being out for extended periods of time. When the product itself is already not great, that's the last thing we need, because it's those stars that could draw us into watching these games, because the quality of the product itself surely is not getting the job done. And it can never be good for the best quarterback in the National Football League to be out for the rest of the season. That benefits nobody. And ultimately, from a selfish Bears fan standpoint, I don't want to beat Brett Hundley. I want to beat the future first ballot Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers. It's like beating up on somebody when the big brother isn't there and you know the big brother is better than anybody else. It sucks for the Packers. It does create opportunities for the Vikings and the Lions. And if you want to be stoned as a Bears fan, you can believe it creates an opportunity for them too. The NFC North just got a whole lot more interesting, that's for sure. But it is still ultimately disappointing and borderline frustrating that another week goes by and we get another major star with a significant injury. It's just the way crap happens. But it does suck. It sucks for Aaron Rodgers, clearly. He's the one with the broken collarbone. It sucks for the Green Bay Packers. Frankly, it sucks for me because I wanted to beat Aaron Rodgers later in the year as a Bears fan. And most importantly of all, for a league that really couldn't afford this, it sucks for the National Football League.